Handling anger and frustration. Imagine a moment when anger takes the driver's seat. For some, it leads straight to destruction. In Greek mythology, an insult to the warrior Achilles ignited such wrath that it cost him his closest friend and ultimately his own life. But anger doesn't always have to burn everything in its path. In 1893, South Africa, a young lawyer named Mohandas Gandhi was thrown off a train simply because of the color of his skin. Humiliated and furious, he stood shivering on a cold platform with a choice: lash out in rage or channel that anger into change. Gandhi chose the latter. He transformed his outrage into resolve, a resolve that sparked his lifelong fight against injustice. This contrast teaches us a powerful lesson about anger. It's a natural emotion, but how we handle it defines our character. Have you ever felt so angry that you lost control? What if, instead, you could master that anger and turn it into a force for good? What if you could harness the fire instead of letting it consume you? Pause. Today, we'll explore exactly that. Understanding our anger and learning to handle frustration in a way that builds us up rather than breaks us down. Understanding anger. To master anger, we first need to understand it. What is anger, really? At its core, anger often stems from a few common causes: blocked expectations. We get angry when reality does not meet the expectations we've built in our minds. You expected a promotion, but it didn't happen. You thought a friend would support you, but they didn't. When our hopes or plans are thwarted, frustration boils over. Sense of injustice. Anger also flares up at the sight of unfairness or wrongdoing. If you've been treated poorly or witnessed someone else suffering unfairly, that righteous fury is born from our innate desire for justice. Think of Gandhi on that train. His anger came from blatant injustice, and it awakened something powerful in him. Loss of control. Many times, anger is a mask over fear and helplessness. When life feels out of our control, a traffic jam making us late, an accident we couldn't prevent, we often respond with anger because it's easier than admitting we feel powerless. Recognizing these root causes is important. It reminds us that anger isn't pure madness coming out of nowhere. It's a response to something real, a blocked goal, a hurt, a fear. Even great leaders throughout history felt anger, yet what set them apart was what they did next. Consider Nelson Mandela. After spending 27 years unjustly imprisoned, he had every reason to emerge bitter and vengeful. But Mandela understood that giving in to blind rage would only sabotage his dream for a free, united nation. Instead, he famously chose forgiveness, saying, "As I walked out the door toward the gate that would lead to my freedom, I knew if I didn't leave my bitterness and hatred behind, I'd still be in prison." By letting go of destructive anger, Mandela transformed personal injustice into a powerful movement for reconciliation. His anger at apartheid became determination to ensure no one else would suffer that way. Reflective pause. Think about the last time you got angry. What sparked it? Was it an unmet expectation? Something or someone didn't act as you hoped? Was it a real wrong that offended your sense of fairness? Or was it a situation you just couldn't control? Now ask yourself, was that trigger within your control or not? Take a moment and really consider it. Pause. The reason I ask is that understanding the why behind your anger is the first step in handling it. When you know what's fueling the fire, you can decide whether to feed it or tame it. The cost of uncontrolled anger. Anger in itself is not bad. It's an emotion, a signal, but uncontrolled anger comes with a heavy price. If we let anger control us, it can harm us in more ways than one. What are the consequences when anger runs wild? First, consider the impact on your health. When you fly into a rage, your body kicks into a stress response. Your heart pounds, blood pressure rises, and stress hormones surge. If this becomes a habit, the effects can be lasting. Studies have shown that the long-term physical effects of uncontrolled anger include heightened anxiety, high blood pressure, and frequent headaches. In fact, even brief episodes of intense anger can impair your heart and blood vessels, increasing the risk of heart attacks and strokes over time. Simply put, staying angry too often is like drinking poison and expecting someone else to suffer. It's your own body that pays the price. Next, think about relationships. How many friendships have been shattered by a harsh word said in anger? How many family dinners have been ruined by a boiling argument? Unchecked anger can turn the people we love into targets. It can lead to bitter arguments, physical fights, even abuse. Over time, loved ones may start to feel like they have to walk on eggshells around an angry person, eroding trust and closeness. An angry outburst at work might cost you the respect of colleagues or even your job. When anger takes the wheel, it often steers us to do and say things we regret, leaving isolation and sadness in its wake. As one Stoic philosopher observed, how much more harmful are the consequences of anger than the circumstances that aroused them. In other words, the trouble that anger creates can be far worse than whatever made us angry in the first place. History and literature give us dramatic examples of this truth. Recall the story of Achilles we touched on earlier. In Homer's Iliad, Achilles' uncontrolled rage began over a personal slight. His pride was wounded by a commander's decision. In protest, Achilles refused to fight for his own army. But this impulsive anger had dire consequences. Without Achilles on the battlefield, his beloved friend Patroclus took his place and was killed by the enemy. Devastated and enraged beyond reason, Achilles charged back into battle to avenge his friend, fully aware that his vengeful path would fulfill a prophecy of his own doom. He slew the Trojan hero Hector in a brutal rage, but that victory was hollow. Achilles' wrath didn't bring Patroclus back. It only caused more grief and ensured Achilles' own early death. His legend teaches us in bold strokes what can happen when anger controls us. We make reckless choices, we hurt others and ourselves, and we may destroy what we hold dearest. Now, we may not be Achilles, but the core lesson applies to us all. The question is not whether you will feel anger. You're human, of course you will. The real question is, what will you do with that anger? Will you let it dictate your actions, or will you take back the reins? This question is at the heart of personal growth, and it leads us to the crux of this speech. How can we take that powerful energy of anger and transform it into something that builds rather than breaks? Call to action, inviting reflection. From this moment on, remember Achilles when you feel rage boiling. Remember that uncontrolled anger can cost far more than whatever provoked it. It's up to you to decide if you'll pay that price or find a better way. How to transform anger into strength. We've seen that anger can burn us, but it can also fuel positive change if we learn to manage it. So, how do we do that? How do we turn anger from a destructive force into a source of strength? Let's explore 3 practical steps. Pause before reacting. The first and simplest tool is a pause. When anger surges, don't react immediately. Take a deep breath. Count to 10. Literally, as Thomas Jefferson famously advised, when angry, count to 10 before you speak. If very angry, count to 100. Give yourself that space. This short pause is powerful because it interrupts the knee-jerk reaction. Viktor Frankl, a man who survived unimaginable trials, said it well. Between stimulus and response, there is a space. In that space is our power to choose our response. In that pause, you regain control. Your racing heart slows a bit, your mind clears. Instead of yelling back an insult or hitting send on that furious email, you step back. Take a breath now. Feel that difference? By pausing, you prevent regretful actions. You also send yourself a message. I am the one in control, not my anger. Change your perspective. Once you've paused, you can reframe the situation. Often, anger narrows our vision to the offense or problem in front of us, but ask yourself, is there another way to look at this? This is where we borrow wisdom from the Stoics, like Marcus Aurelius. Marcus faced constant frustrations, wars, betrayals, difficulties of ruling an empire, yet he trained himself to see obstacles differently. The impediment to action advances action. What stands in the way becomes the way, he wrote. In other words, the very thing that blocks your path can become the path. If someone criticizes you unfairly, instead of seething, try to find the useful feedback in it or simply view it as their issue, not yours. If a plan falls apart, consider that it might be an opportunity to try a new approach. Reframing anger doesn't mean you like what happened. It means you choose a response that serves you. Nelson Mandela did this masterfully. He saw that years of imprisonment gave him insight and patience to lead a fractured country. He turned personal anger into understanding, asking, how can I use this pain to bring about change? Likewise, when you face a frustration, try to see it as a test of your patience or a lesson in resilience, or even a source of motivation. By changing your perspective, you rob the situation of its power to make you angry, and instead use it to grow stronger. Channel anger into action. Finally, anger generates energy, adrenaline, passion, fire. Instead of letting that energy explode aimlessly, channel it into purposeful action. Many of the greatest changes in history were fueled by people turning their anger into positive action. Martin Luther King Jr. witnessed vicious racism and injustice that could have made him bitter or violent. Indeed, he admitted there were times he felt anger and rage at what he saw. But Dr. King believed that anger, if harnessed, could become a useful force. Rather than fighting hate with hate, he channeled his frustration into a relentless campaign for justice. When his home was bombed and an angry crowd of his supporters gathered, ready to retaliate, King stood on his porch and urged them to put down their weapons and go home peacefully. His composure in that moment was legendary. He refused to let anger dictate his actions. Over and over, he transformed his personal outrage into fuel for speeches, marches, and appeals to conscience that ultimately changed the world. We can follow that example on a smaller scale in our own lives. Feeling angry about a problem at work? Channel it into a solution. Pour that energy into a project or propose a constructive change. Angry about injustices in your community? Use that passion to volunteer, to speak up respectfully, to support a cause, even on a personal level. If someone hurts you, you can decide, I will not let this anger make me destructive. I'll use it to set healthy boundaries or to improve myself. Anger is raw power. By channeling it, you're essentially saying, I will drive this energy. I won't let it drive me. Whether it's through creativity, advocacy, exercise, or problem solving, find an outlet that gives your anger a positive purpose. Interactive moment. Now, take a moment to imagine your future self using these techniques. Picture a situation that normally makes you furious. Maybe a colleague's snide remark or a family argument. Envision yourself at that moment, your heart rate rising, that heat in your chest. Now see yourself pausing. You take that breath and remember you have a choice. You ask, what's really behind my anger here? And reframe the incident. Finally, you decide to respond constructively, perhaps calmly explaining your feelings or channeling your energy into fixing the issue. How different is that outcome from the usual outburst? Next time you feel anger rising, what will you do differently? Will you let it control you, or will you take control? I challenge you, even in that heated moment, to hear my voice reminding you, pause, breathe, and turn this into something good, because you can. The next time anger knocks, meet it at the door as a master, not a slave. Conclusion. As we conclude, let's return to our central theme. Anger is energy. Either you control it or it controls you. We've seen anger topple a hero like Achilles, and we've seen it empower heroes like Gandhi, Mandela, and King. The anger itself wasn't what made the difference. It was the response. The good news is that this power of response lies in your hands, starting now. So, I leave you with a final call to action. From today forward, commit to mastering your emotions. Don't shy away from anger or deny it. Acknowledge it, understand it, then choose how to use it. Remember that true strength is not demonstrated by the loudest shout or the fiercest retaliation. True power is not in winning arguments or overpowering others. It's in mastering yourself. It's in that moment when you feel the flame of anger, and instead of letting it burn uncontrollably, you cup it in your hands and turn it into light. My friends, imagine the freedom and growth you'll experience when anger no longer controls you, but fuels you. Every time you succeed in staying calm, in reframing a frustration, in channeling anger into something constructive, you win a small victory for your character. Those victories add up to a calmer mind, healthier relationships, and a more purposeful life. The next time anger flares up, you know what to do. Pause and breathe. Reflect on the why. Transform that fire into forward motion. In doing so, you not only avoid the pitfalls of uncontrolled anger, you also tap into a well of motivation and strength that can carry you toward your goals. Let anger be your teacher and your fuel, but never your master. Master yourself, and you truly hold the power. That is the journey of personal development we all strive for. Starting now, make that commitment to yourself. I will handle my anger and frustration with wisdom and grace. Do this, and you'll not only redefine anger in your life, you'll redefine yourself as a calmer, stronger, and more inspired individual. Thank you. Now go forth and turn your anger into your ally.